Hello, in this video we will go through the solutions to Quiz 1A. If you're in section 1, you realize it's called Quiz 1A because I had a Canvas bust at the beginning of the quiz. I had to rewrite it quickly, which also meant that the questions weren't quite as randomized as they would have been otherwise. I'll have that fixed by Quiz 2. I would like your feedback. What I tried to do is front load the weighting of the problem. So 1 and 2 made up half the exam or the quiz. 3 through 10 made up another 40% of it. And then there were another 10 questions or so that made up the remainder of the quiz for just 1 point each. My strategy was to front load the points so I didn't penalize too badly people who didn't complete the entire quiz, but also keep people busy enough for most of the quiz time available that they weren't available to collude with someone else still taking the quiz. Another thing I did was randomize the order of the questions and prevent people from going back by locking questions after answering. I welcome your feedback on that. Again, my whole goal is to keep you protected from others cheating and getting an unfair advantage on you. Before I jump into the quiz, a brief word from our sponsors. I've got your attention and I'd like you to refer to the syllabus where I talk about team progress reports. Almost all of you are now entering your team name when this window comes up to schedule your 10-minute team progress report, but make sure you're not entering a person's name here. Make sure you're entering a team name. This is the big red arrow that I refer to in the syllabus. Most people are doing that, but some are still putting their own name here. I was unable to edit it using Calendly to make that say team name, so this is all I could do. The majority of you are following number 2 here and preparing a single slide that addresses these 5 questions. Make sure you do that every week and make sure that you are compiling those in case I asked for them toward the end of the semester. Now back to the quiz. Problem 1 for everyone was this lawns problem. I was unable to randomize due to the Canvas bust, so we all start with this one. And this was straight out of a video. The only thing that's different between this and the discounted cash flows video is we have 5 periods over which we are going to depreciate the investment instead of 3. And so this was an exercise for you to appreciate the value of getting around in Excel reasonably quickly. This quiz was not demanding on Excel skills like the future ones will be, but let's go through it. So we want to say negative investment. No need for dollar signs on that because we're not copying it anywhere. And when I hit say enter, I want to get to this. So I can use a right arrow or a tab, but I'm going to use the tab key to work my way across to save a little bit of time. So the lawns, if we look at these titles, we can figure out we're making an investment. If we have the number of lawns that we're doing per year, 75, times the price per lawn to get revenue, then it becomes relatively straightforward and right out of the video. So the first thing I need to do is refer to the number of lawns that I'm going to mow per year. And since I'm going to copy that down, I at least need absolute references on the 7, but it's easiest to just have 4 and take them on both. There's absolutely no harm in that. In fact, it's a little bit easier to proofread later because you see lots of dollar signs. You realized it's definitely an absolute value. Some people did this, which is equally good, but you have to take a little bit of time to say, well, now did I want that on the D or the 7? Where if it looks like this, then I know it's absolute. I just move on. Same thing here. Dollar signs. So the revenue is just this times this. A few people used the product. You know how we use a sum function? They used product of this and this. You can do that if you want, but I'd rather type an asterisk than the word product. Expenses need to be negative, and this time they were easy. It's just the same amount per year, so I'll absolute reference that. Before tax cash flow. So I'm going to continue working on year 1, but I'm going to have to copy this up to year 0 here in a moment. And before tax cash flow would be any investments, if I have it, plus the revenue, plus these negative expenses. Now I think I said in the previous video, if you'll use sum, you can't get the signs wrong. But some of you proved me wrong. You used sum and you said it would be this plus this minus this. So let me rephrase what I said in the video. If you will just always add things algebraically, never subtract, but you keep your outflows negative, then you'll be fine, whether you use sum or pluses. Now I'm going to take a moment to answer a question that I got before the quiz. A lot of people were asking me, how did I make this red and how did I make this red? Well, as you see from the video, Excel just sort of did that for me. If I type minus dollar number, it makes it red. Where the red comes from is up here. If I go to more number formats or Control 1 to get here, I can choose any of these, and then I have 4 different options. At least on currency, I have four negative numbers. So I could show my negative numbers in parentheses, but keep the text black, keep the font color black. I could show it without parentheses and make it red. I could show it with just the negative sign black or parentheses black. So any of those, it's kind of like formatting percentages. Excel doesn't know or care which format we used when it does the calculations. So let me undo that. If you want to make yours look like mine, that's how you would do it. That was certainly not required for this. Now we tell you in the problem that the DD&A is going to be the investment amount divided by 5. And in a video soon to be released, I'll give you a more elegant way to do this. But right now, this is how we do it. Now we do need to make that an absolute reference. Copy that down 5 times. Taxable cash flow. So revenue plus negative expenses is taxable. This investment is not taxable, and the investment is in here. And a lot of you double dipped. You put it in the BTax cash flow, and then you put it in the DD&A and paid taxes on it twice. So we don't want it in the taxable cash flow as a lump sum. We just want the DD&A in there. That's why we calculate the DD&A. And then the taxes becomes the negative tax rate times the cash flow. And the after-tax cash flow is the BTax cash flow plus the negative taxes. Now, how much of this can I copy? I can copy all this down. So I'm going to select it all. I could do this a number of ways. I could just drag it down like that, or I'm used to using the keyboard, so I'll copy, shift, down, 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 paste with Control V. And then that works fine. Now I need to go up one. Let's copy the whole line and think about what we don't need. We're not doing any lawns at time 0. A couple of you assumed you would. I don't think I counted off for that, but we're not doing any lawns at time 0. So we don't have any revenue or expenses. Do we have before tax cash flow at time 0? Yes, we do. We had to write that check at time 0 to buy that mower. So we need to keep that cell. Do we have any DD&A? No, we start depreciating that later. You knew that from the video, but when you see the more elegant ways of calculating DD&A, we'll move beyond that issue. So what's our taxable cash flow? We didn't have any DD&A, we didn't have any expenses, we didn't have any revenue, so it's calculating 0. I'm going to go ahead and leave that there. And then the taxes on that, of course, are 0. So since we are able to amortize this, depreciate it over time, then we don't actually pay any taxes at time 0. If you are in a energy project where you're taking all of that DD&A at time 0, then you would actually have a nice tax shield as soon as you write that check. And then of course we need to sum up the cash flow because we did have to write that check for $6,000. That completes our cash flow table, if you will, down here. And so the next thing we need to do is calculate a rate of return in an NPV. And I was very excited that practically everybody got this formula right. It's usually a big challenge. I think maybe that has to do with open book tests. Maybe it has to do with me going over and over it ad nauseum this semester. But either way, I was thrilled that you got it right. And so since I didn't put the ending parentheses on, it gives me this little error and says, do you want me to end that parentheses for you? And I'll say yes. Okay, so we've built the model correctly. Now we need to adjust the price per lawn to the amount that provides exactly a 15% rate of return. So we'll go to that. Goal seek, set it to 0.15 or 15% as you prefer by changing the price per lawn. And it actually turned out to be 52.465, blah, blah, blah. If you happened to show additional decimal places, and you may have found out that after about 3 significant figures, Excel wouldn't let you get any more precise. We'll talk about calculation options in a future video, but if you'll do an Alt-FTF to go down to Options and Formulas, you can improve that accuracy right here. This is not, you're not required to know this at this point, but let me rerun that goal seek. If that was bothering you, now you know how to fix it. We can get it to exactly 15%. Now let's move to problem 2. Problem 2 was a wealth management question. And a lot of this was done for you. This was more of a critical thinking question and also a little bit of practice with a basic data table. The first thing we need to do is format inputs and outputs appropriately. So we know the rule. If we go through here and they're all values, there's no way they can be outputs. So they have to be inputs. And if this one is a formula, there's no way it can be an input. So we'll make it an output. Now, at this point, you could think through and do the boat purchase amount, but a lot of people messed up on this one. I don't know if it's because they forgot to come back or because they made the wrong assumption at the beginning, but I'll try not to forget to come back. On the second step, we're told to observe how H21 has been added to the model. This was not in the video. Notice there's a new column in here to reflect a boat purchase. And H21, let's see what that does. Let's hit F2, which I think was a 1-point question later. F2 says, take the negative of that boat purchase. Okay, so here's a little critical thinking for you. If our drawdown, if the amount that the people need to live on each year is negative and shown as an outflow, then it looks like whoever wrote this model wants that boat purchase to be the same way. And so if that's going to show up here as a negative, then I need to put a positive amount in here that reflects how much that boat costs. And let's say I'm going to spend $5 on a boat. That's ridiculous, but let's put a placeholder in there. Okay, so it's showing up negative. Now, is it going anywhere? If I come over here and look at my portfolio at the end of the year, it's ignoring that $5. So even if I spent $5 billion on a boat, or 500 million, it's really not affecting my portfolio any. So I know I've got a problem here. So let's take it down to my $5 again. I know I'm going to need to adjust at least this cell. And if I really wanted to follow the modeling rules, then I probably shouldn't have just one formula in here that's different than all the others. Didn't take off points for this, but if I'll copy that and paste it. Now if I decide to buy another boat in another year or something, then my model is more robust and will handle that. Didn't lose points for that, but you did need to make sure that this number was getting incorporated into the model using a little bit of critical thinking. If you did that, then you're finished with the modeling part. That was step 3. And you're ready to move to step 4. Find the most that could be spent on the boat without making the portfolio negative. And so almost everyone came in here and they said set this to 0 because by changing the boat price. If I set it to anything above 0, then I underestimated what I could spend on a boat because I would still have money left over at the end of the year. If I set it to anything below 0, then I would have spent too much on the boat and it would have been negative. So you had to set it to 0. A couple of people set it to $1. And I gave credit for that, but I kind of wondered, well, why did they choose $1 instead of 50 cents or 1 penny or any other amount? So we just set it equal to 0. That's fine. Let's move on. Now's a good time to come back and format this cell. Clearly, it's a number that we're typing in so it can drive the model to get a result. And we know that means it's an input. And finally, we get to complete and format the data table to show the sensitivity of an output portfolio at the end of year 10 to 2 inputs, proportion vested in equities, and the boat purchase amount, 150, 175, or 200, which notice is kind of in the range that we found in step 4. And I wonder if more people would have gotten this correctly if I would have said format and complete the data table, because really that's the order in which you do it. We need to decide what are the inputs and what are the outputs. Well, we know if we're looking at sensitivity to these two things, then these are inputs and these are outputs. Some of you formatted those words, which doesn't make any sense, but most of you formatted the numbers. So if those are inputs, and these are inputs, then it becomes pretty obvious we're dealing with a two-dimensional model, and there's only one place we can put an output. And we know that we're looking at the sensitivity to the portfolio at the end of year 10. And there's only one output in this model. It goes right there. So we know we can do that and then format it as an output. And so you did lose points if you didn't format those three items correctly and these items correctly. And now you're ready to complete the data table, and it's pretty straightforward at this point. Just about everybody got the select enough cells to get the formatted ones and only enough to get the formatted ones, and then go to your data table and decide what is the row input cell. Well, these are in a row, and it says proportion invested in equities, so that must be proportion invested in equities. And the column says boat purchase amount, so the column must be here. When I say OK, then I get the correct answer. So that was problem 2. The next 8 problems will be in a random order, so yours may have been in a different order, but they were the same 8 problems. So let's talk through some of those. Use Excel to find a net present value of certain numbers and a discount rate. I'll open up an Excel window and do the calculation. So let me build a model that starts with $1 million investment, $500,000 at the end of that year, and the following 2 years. We have a discount rate of 12%. I'm being very quick and dirty with this because I'm not going to submit the model, just the number. And I can keep in my head what I'm doing here for 30 seconds. So it's going to be that times 0 cash flow plus the NPV at that discount rate of these cash flows. And look what it did. It gave me a percent. I think if I have this formatted as $1, then it wouldn't have outsmarted me like that. But since I didn't have any formatting on these, and I had a percentage formatting on this one, Excel outsmarted me and tried to make life too easy for me, which made some of your lives miserable on this problem. So let's go back to Home, Number, and instead of making a percentage, let's just make it general. And I'm going to copy that cell. I'm going to paste it right here. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to tell you what I mean by this. Being sure not to include a $sign or Canvas will not accept it because it's expecting an answer. If I had formatted that as some kind of a currency and tried to copy it and paste it here, a Canvas gives me this error. It says only numerical values are accepted. So I could either come over here and delete the $sign and then it would accept it, or I could come back here and format it as something else. Let's go back and format it as general again. Copy, paste, and then it should accept my answer. Now I did sneak one file submission question here. It was only worth 5 points, and some of you told me you were glad because it was difficult for you. Let's talk about how to do that one. On the snow cone problem, I give you a pretty big model, but when you look at it closely, you realize I just did a save as from the discounted cash flow video. I've got some inputs. I've got quantity times price gets to revenue, and this should be very reminiscent of the first problem on the test when we were dealing with lawns. I've already calculated NPV and rate of return for you, and I say complete the data table in M12 to S19. So in that area, complete the data table to show how annual ATAX cash flow changes with supply expenses. Well, these are ATAX cash flows. They occur annually. And I gave you a tremendous hint here because I already formatted these as outputs. So I want to see how each of those numbers, ATAX net cash flow in years 0 through 4, changes with my supply expenses. So I should know that I'm going to have a horizontal 1D data table just from looking at how these are formatted. Now, if I select all the cells and only enough cells to get the formatted ones, that's where my data table is really going to be. That's the part I want to select before doing the entering. Now I can populate these cells before or after I do this next step, but it's probably more logical to do them now. So if I want ATAX net cash flow, like any other output on any other data table, I need to point that somewhere in the model. And in this case, I can just copy that down and paste it. And so this is what my cash flow, my annual cash flow looks like in the base case. But I want to know what it would look like if my supply expenses were less or if they were more. And so I'll select enough and only enough to get the formatted cells, do my data table shortcut, and then the row input. Do I have a row input? Yes, I do. I have inputs in a row right there, and they are supply expenses. So they go here. Do I have a column input cell? A lot of you tried, but no, there's no column input cell. There's a column of output cells, but that's because this is a 1D horizontal data table with more than one output. And so when I say OK, I see, well, this is my base case for what ATAX net cash flow could be. But if my supply expenses are lower, then my annual ATAX cash flow is a little bit higher. Instead of 493, it's running about 573. Or if the supply expenses are higher, then my cash flow is lower. It goes from 493 down to 413 and so forth. And so we'd save that and upload that for that question. I hope everyone got this. Never use a value when a reference will work. If you put something like formula or something there and didn't get credit for it and you want to ask for regrading, I'll consider that if you follow the regrading policy in the syllabus. The next question was about a retirement planner. And if I were doing this problem, F12 is the formula I'm interested in. It's wealth at the end of the year. I could rack my brain and think, well, how do I calculate that? Or I could notice that every single one of these takes D12 times 1 plus C4 plus E12 times 1 plus C6. I say, okay, well, I don't really have to think about the math. I just have to think about the modeling rule and copying this down. And so if I'm dealing with D12 and E12, do I want any dollar signs on them so I can copy it down? No. So I can rule out anything that has dollar signs on the 12. Now, if I'm also dealing with C4 and C6, do I want those to move up and down? No. The 4 always needs a dollar sign and the 6 always needs a dollar sign. And so I can scan through here quickly and say, it's actually the first one on my list where the 12s don't have dollar signs and the 4 and the 6 do. So I'm finished with that problem. Now I want to write a formula that would calculate the correct answer in C3. Well, C3 is total revenue, and we know by now that revenue is price times quantity. And so if I wanted to add up all of these times all of these, in other words, 98.53 times 397 plus 98.11 times 414, and so on, I know that there is a function for that, and it's called sum product. And it needs these two arrays. I could do B7 through B30, comma, C7 through C30, or I could do C7 through C30, B7 through B30. Excel doesn't care which one of those I put first or whether I capitalize or anything or not. If you wrote something close to that and didn't get credit, please use the regrading policy in the syllabus. This was a 6th grade algebra problem. If you remember, I think, is it PEMDAS? They talk about parentheses happening first and then the order of operations. And so this was a formula that was on my study guide. I want you to get really comfortable with this formula this semester, that the present value is equal to the future value divided by something that's generally bigger than 1. And that 1 plus the interest rate is always taken to the exponent of the periods. And so if I think about how all that shakes out, it pretty much has to be this answer. I just threw some extra parentheses in there to get you thinking about your PEMDAS. Another modeling rules question. So this time in F14, this is a formula I'm going to want to copy down. And I'm going to need some dollar signs. No, the answer is going to be 500, but I certainly don't want to use a value where a reference would work. I do want to always refer to row 5, so I'm going to need a dollar sign in front of the 5. But I don't always want to refer to 14, so I won't need that dollar sign. And so it looks like this is the only one that matches all of those criteria. Which formula in D13 would best follow the modeling rules? If you notice, every one of these uses a value when a reference would work except this one. So let's move on. If you were trying to take these cells and use them to populate these cells, I was thrilled by the high percentage of correct answers on this, and I accepted things as simply as copy, paste, special, transpose. Because that's what you do. You copy these cells, you paste special, and then you click the transpose box. Some of you wrote longer essays, then that's okay, but this was very elegant and brief. Which of the following are not possible? Well, if you go back and refer to the video where my daughter drew the function machine, I think it's pretty clear that you can't have 2 inputs and 2 outputs, but you can have any of the others. To edit a current cell, I hit F2, and that is available on a Mac. If it's not working on your Mac, you need to go and change how your function keys are working, or else you need to hit an extra key before you hit F2. The rate of return is, of course, the discount rate, which makes the net present value equal to 0. And when selecting a range of cells, always select enough and only enough to include the formatted cells. So if I want to create the data table below, first I need to look at this and figure out where the data table is. And again, if I'm familiar with discounted cash flow models, all of this looks straight out of a video. And I've got a data table down here. I seem to have some row inputs and some column inputs. And it looks like those row inputs are sales price per snow cone. So they are going to go into D6. And the column of inputs is supply expenses per snow cone, which would be D5. So I need to type D6 and D5. The keyboard shortcut to change our absolute references is F4. Same comment, it works on a Mac, but only if you have your function keys set correctly or if you're typing the right combination of keys to get the F4 key to actually work. If you need help with that, let me know. Which Excel function has the misleading name? This is plastered all over the videos, and based on people's performance on this, I think you understood it well. Why is its name misleading? Well, essentially because it discounts even the first cash flow you give it, which is not what finance academics expect. And should Microsoft correct this issue? I feel pretty strongly that the right answer to this is no, because it would then corrupt any model that was ever made with the NPV function. But if you said yes and justified it well, I gave you credit for it. The answers I liked best and didn't even think of before the quiz was they should just come out with a new one that works correctly and uses a different name, and that would keep everyone happy. So if you have any questions about the quiz, let me know. Otherwise, refer to Canvas to see what you got right and wrong, and consider the regrading policy in the syllabus if you think it's applicable. Have a great day.